What I propose to do in this video is bring you up to date on April 10th, 2024, regarding the trashy legacy that Israel and Britain have settled on by what they've done to Gaza. One of the things that people know about me is that I was dealing with AIDS when COVID happened, COVID when Ukraine happened, and Ukraine when Gaza happened. So the power structure just keeps moving on to bigger and better things, and smoking the preservation of history. What I want to discuss with you is how dishonest they're being, particularly Roger Waters and his friends who have come out in support of Gaza. So naturally enough, there's a contradiction seemingly there. Shouldn't I be loyal to Roger Waters? Which is ridiculous. They say that we can't talk about anything but October 7th, 2023, because there's no time to talk about the 75-year history of Israel. Well, we're not supposed to talk about Roger Waters' history with me either. So the dishonesty factor is written in the way they've proceeded. Basically, what they've set up is a situation where I'm supposed to perform for them. They have Greg Carl's mentality. He used to say Jimmy is going to perform for us. And they use Greg Starcynic, which is like has Ringo Starr and arsenic in it, as one of their agent names. So Greg Carl has long been a darling of Kissinger and Clinton. Kissinger called Clinton gregarious back in the days when the script was first surfacing in Pittsburgh. So Fripp and Bush were chummy. Fripp said something about being more sensitive and caring, and I aired that. Bush came up with the kinder, gentler stuff. This calm response to the switchboard shows you that a point that Ray Geiger made, which was that the Beatles were the power structure. They were the imperial masquerade. And most of the people on the left are, when it comes to Beatles, willing to let bygones be bygones. But he called them a brainwashing device, and that is what they are. They came into the prominence with the death of Kennedy and King. They turned what was a suit and tie leadership into Jerry Rubin throwing pies at people and passing around the hashish and so on. So what they're doing with me is another example of their dishonesty. It really, even though they say, Greg Carl's, I'm going to perform them, they cast me against my rights in a role, and they're saying that the way that I resist proves that I deserve it. And they get people who are victims of their war on theft to wage war on theft. But Steve Langer made an admission that it had nothing to do with me. It was just who I symbolize, because my father was a humanist, and they want a child of a humanist. It's a Macbethian witch recipe. Child of humanist is a metaphor for abortion. We'll make him deaf because he can't hear the silent scream, etc. They get the women to go along with this by saying John Lennon is his abortion. So they have this red line about virgins. It's called Operation Little Girl. And virginity is their line in the sand. Leslie's virginity was a line in the sand, right? because Netanyahu and Bush carved up the world the way the Berlin Conference carved up Africa, according to their mentalplex, what George Will called one man's psychodrama. Supposedly mine. I didn't write the script. And they take out their horrifying jealousies on me. So, what I mean to say when I say it, Langer said that I'm not sorry for anything I did, only that it had to be used. It's not really about me. It's an algorithm that they put together in which I'm a unit to be used. And they make this claim that my traits as a human being are up for discussion, in this weird phantasm that Trump put together. We know it's Trump because he's the one who comes up with these gorgeous girls. That's why I fell in love with a gorgeous girl. We made love. Now everybody hates me. That's the basic um, recipe for the shake and bake con job that Payne or Sinfield put together with Trumpy Turn. Sinfield had a band called I Talk to the Wind, which was based on Wind Talkers, which was the cocktail establishment or something during World War II. And so they were observationing the way governments observe a holiday. And they had this thing about Death Sea. So it's clearly planned out well in advance. And although they claimed I deserved it because I was jealous, the truth is that I was burned with an acid burn. The truth is, if you look at the story from several years ago where the boy was playing with gasoline in a fire and got severely burnt, God help him. An outpouring of grief because he was Texan, not Gazan, came his way, and he was inundated with medical expense donations and prayers and so on. And I hope he survived and got well. But there was none of that when it came to the acid burn that was poured on me because it wouldn't do. The weird theologians were there's a Palestinian Christian who was interviewed by Carlson Tucker. He said, there's a theological evangelical school of thought that seems to think if enough Jews get into Israel, Christ will come back. Well, they have the same mentality in commercials for themselves about the line in the sand over virginity. But don't buy it. These people are working with David Bowie, who broke the hearts of many young virgins. They're traffickers. And their jealousy has caused them to create a word game called Two Virgins. It's an international fight club. And the women are apparently in academics stoked with the idea that it's feminazism is liberation. So it's pretty sad, really. And another thing that's very dishonest about these women in academics, I should say all the rivals that I have in academics, Yanis is a good example. He actually encourages the Zionists and Trump because he would rather have to duke it out with someone he knows is an enemy than have to do conscious labor and intentional suffering with the gray mice people are scornfully saying about the old people who don't have the energy to take on the extreme mentality of people like Peter Gabriel. So what they did was they denied me an education by making me deaf. Again, they claimed, oh, you made yourself deaf. You put clay in your pecker and in your ears and up your nose. Well, it's the same with the Texas kid. I mean, that, if that had been the boy who could have saved John Lennon, they would have said, you were playing with gas. Ha 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 ha, you got burned. Burn hand teaches, my. You can't get an education without sign language, and they refused to teach me sign language. Not because of anything I was. Langer admitted that. It was because they were using me. So I didn't know what was going on. I mean, if I could have heard, I could have. I have questions, for example, why aren't there the Peace Corps in Gaza? If I could hear, I'd get on the phone. I'd grow up hearing I'm 63. I have friends from Peace Corps. Hey, why weren't there Peace Corps people in Gaza? But they have this escape behavior with Yoko Ono. They go, um, it's found art and it's Operation Little Girl. Jimmy just wants a second virgin, then we get to kill him with HIV. And Greg Carl wins his game, right? So he's going to perform for us. And Louis Lapham was like, well, if you want to be a writer, you won't mind if we manipulate and experiment on you and peep on you and steal everything from you and give you Parkinson's. And Gail Burstyn was like, ain't it funny how all I've wanted to say has already been written? That's the idea that Monty Python had too, you know. In Life of Brian, he says, I like orders, you know, as a foil against Brian's explanation for why they don't have to follow corruption. And Bowie says, we don't want to be changed in the life of one size fits all was what they were saying. They didn't care. They say, you know, oh, you're causing us pain. If you have pleasure, we get jealous. And they went from one or two, three, four people. They blew on the fire and said one size fits all. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And they're still not willing to man up about what they did. They made no attempt to intervene and stop it. It just kept getting worse and worse and worse. Does that sound familiar with these people? Oh, Rafa will be safe. They told me if I take the castration enzyme, they won't kill a bystander. So I did it, and they murdered Shannon Harps. It's typical of them. That's their standard play of action. And everybody in rock and roll is defending them. Everybody in rock and roll is defending them. The Rolling Stones played in Tel Aviv. So they have a pretty tawdry legacy. What they're afraid of course, is sustainable development. They don't want schools that serve the purpose of teaching people things from cradle to grave. Now, when it comes to theft, everybody's down on theft because it leads to abortion, right? So no theft. So, and if you have an abortion, you will be followed, identified, and punished. We used to have to take names off the book cards about abortion because people who checked them out were being followed by the weird theologists. And it was all planned in advance. Yoko Ono is a liar. She says, what goes around comes around, right? She says, we'll prove you're a liar. You lied to some woman in the past, some woman in the name index, some Andrea Dworkin or Harrington, right? Who you should have bought a ring, buy her a ring. Byington and Harrington, buy her a ring, right? And they get out their pistols and say, Dada is looking after his daughters. But you lied to a girl, therefore we hire girls to lie to you. And the circle goes to a nuclear revenge because I was from the Navy, little boy bomb. That was the little boy bomb. The little girl gets revenge through this Fluxus turnaround system. From 46 to 64 is 18 years, which is alphanumeric for age. So they really did do this. LT for supposedly stood for um, Larry T. a mouthpiece on my saxophone, but it also stands for Last Temptation. And Fripp was one of the people who was initializing his records with much heaviosity. He called Stars and Bible Black an acknowledgement to DT. And they can say, well, it's because DT was Dylan Thomas, who came up with this slow black, cool black, starless and Bible black fishing boat bobbing sea and under milkweed. But they have a lot of language tip-offs. Ricky Apple used to talk about being in pre-medical school or premeditation. It makes you wonder, right? So he lived with near Sidney Busey on the same street as the man who was a Holocaust survivor director who tended my ears when I was a little boy. Said we were unable to achieve reliable, pure tone results in his letter to Silverman, Mendel Silverman. And Dee Dee, they say, was not a virgin, but Greg Carl writes the initial encounter of the X motive is tainted by the shadow of its adversary. This was all being planned in the 70s. There's nothing found art about any of it. It was all in the works, and it's a weird theology scandal because Christianity, in my view, agrees with this learned Christian from Palestine. It's how you treat people and what's real. And they have this weird theology that they say, oh, you have to obey, bring the Jews in for the second coming and follow the leader about virgins. And if you cross the red line, it's an existential threat to what? To human traffickers. That's right. It's the whole thing is about human trafficking, and that's the reason why women shouldn't be going along with it. I had expected Dr. Peg Simons of Hypatia Feminist Journal employed me and called me her friend. There were some suspicious people in that office, but I had expected that she understood that virginity proves discretion about restraint. Well, they had overdubs going, things about, oh, I wanted fire and heat, and you gave me butterflies. You know, it was a mockery of manhood. And that's what led to the terminal problem of King Crimson's mind game directed at me. But women should not be on the side of human traffickers. Now, some liberated women think that pornography is their right. That's between the women. And they should have come to my defense. It's clear the reason they didn't is because they thought they had a trump. They thought they could say John Lennon was your abortion in the sock. But the reality is that it was a Houdini operation that was being planned from a long time ago by the Italian futurists. And the Beatles did soundtrack for this imperial wizardry. And the legacy has gotten to be a little bit overbearing.